Good afternoon, colleagues. It is great being with you for our second webinar for the STEM Teachers Without Borders program project. And it's great having all of you here. Great to see so many teachers willing to be part of a professional development opportunity hosted by the Northwest University's self-directed learning research area. And it's a great privilege for me to be able to be your host and also to share some of my thoughts around puppetry in education and how we can use puppetry when we teach. So it's absolutely great having you all here. You'll see that we've got myself and then Professor Joseph de Beer as well as Professor Neil Peterson that will all be contributing today, and I'll invite them onto stage soon. But it's great to see that our teachers are joining. I know a lot of the teachers have registered for this session but can't necessarily attend in person. They will be sent the recording of today a bit later as we finished. And of course, everybody that is here, you can also watch the recording a bit later on. And every time you want to just have a relook at how we can use puppetry in education. So a great big welcome to everybody. I just want to know in which province we've got our teachers that's attending. So if you can use the chat, and let's all see if we can find the chat button. There's the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. They'll say there's something that says, say something nice. So maybe just tell us there from which province you are so we can see if all of our provinces are represented. And then, of course, we also know that everybody knows how to use the chat functionality. So while you do that, I'm eagerly waiting to see from which province you are. You are, of course, more than welcome to use the chat functionality throughout today to interact with us. It'll be sad if this is presented as a lecture style, because we don't really want to go back to lecture style of professional development. I'd much rather want this to be an engaging session where we can learn from each other. And that's the whole point. I'm definitely not the world's best puppeteer, but I do have enthusiasm for it, and I really enjoy working with the puppets, especially in preparing for today's webinar. I really enjoyed working with my colleagues that you'll see on screen very soon. So let's see, we've got Natasha from Mpumalanga, we've got Rihanna from Gauteng, we've got Ella from the Vrystaat, we've got Kamohelo also from Gauteng, we've got the Northern Cape. We've got Kimberly, Alana, this from Kimberly. So we're missing a few provinces. We're missing Limpopo. We're missing KwaZulu-Natal. What else? Who else are we missing? Eastern Cape. We're missing the Eastern Cape still. But I'm sure we'll have many of our colleagues joining us. But now that you know how to use the chat functionality, you'll see at the bottom there is a poll. And I'd really like to get your input. You'll see if you click on poll, on the polls button, you'll see there is a question, and our question today is, should we use puppets when teaching in the high school? I'd really like to get your opinion there, because that's one of the biggest criticisms of this webinar. As I send it out, a lot of people respond and say, I'm teaching high school, so this isn't for me. And we purposefully chose to name our webinar today that it is even for the high school. So while we do that, I did send out an email yesterday and earlier today to ask our teachers to send through photos with their puppets. Now, I do know it's short notice, but I thought, let's see if our teachers can quickly find props around the house that they can make their own puppets with. I'll introduce you to my other puppets a bit later. Unfortunately, I didn't see many of the photos come through, but I thought, let me show you some of the fun we had in our previous webinar. You can, of course, still find it. If you, now that you've registered on the Crowdcast platform, you'll be able to scroll back on my profile. There is the webinar we did on the Bono's thinking hats, to take a selfie with a hat, and we shared that. So those were the photos that I got from our previous webinar, and I'd really like to have some more photos of you with your puppets. So if you just look around wherever you're sitting at the moment, whether you're in the classroom, in an office, or maybe in your kitchen, there should be something close to you that you can use as a puppet. Even if it's a stuffed toy, if you have to take off your own sock, then so be it. But it would be great to see you with your puppet. And if you can then send through your selfie with your puppet to our WhatsApp service. So let me give you a little bit of context about this WhatsApp service. This is the STEM Teachers Without Borders WhatsApp community. It's not a WhatsApp group. Nobody else will have access to your information whatsoever. It's literally just a one-way communication between the STEM Teachers Without Borders project and yourself. We'll also use this WhatsApp service to share with you the professional development opportunities that the STEM Teachers Without Borders project in the self-directed learning research niche area will be coming up with. And especially now that we're moving into level 1 of the lockdown, and then subsequently, hopefully, level 0 after that, we would be able to start doing more professional development opportunities in person. So we'll be using this WhatsApp service to communicate to you where our professional development opportunities and short learning programs of the Northwest University's Faculty of Education, specifically in the self-directed learning unit, we'll be able to communicate with you there. So pretty please take a selfie with your puppet, a stuffed toy, your sock, a finger puppet, anything that you can use, because I'm going to ask you to participate. Nobody's going to see you unless you post it on social media, but that's totally up to you. It would be great to get some photos with you and your puppet. And this is quite exciting. In arranging this webinar, I had a chat to Professor Peterson and to Professor De Beer, and asked him, can't we give away some of our handcrafted puppets? And you'll get to learn the background and the origin story of this puppets a little bit later on from another colleague. But Professor De Beer and Professor Peterson agreed that we should definitely give away 2 of our handcrafted puppets. So what we are going to ask is that you participate in our competition, and it can be a lot of fun. So what you need to do is you'll need to choose any curriculum topic. Now, I do know that our teachers aren't all STEM teachers, science, technology, engineering, or mathematics teachers, but that doesn't matter. Any subject or curriculum topic, and we want you to write a 3 to 4 minute puppetry script. Now, you might feel like, oh, I know nothing about script writing. I might not know anything about puppetry, so I can't participate. You would be wrong. By the end of today's webinar, you definitely know how to write at least a basic framework for a puppetry script. And also, you'd be able to know how to use a puppet, at least if it's just the basics of puppetry. And then what we want you to do is film yourself teaching that lesson, the 3 to 4 minute lesson, of course, with your puppet. We don't just want you to teach a normal lesson. We would love for you to use your puppet in your lesson and film yourself. You'll then send that video link. You can either upload it onto YouTube, or you can upload it onto a Google Drive or anything like that. You then just send me the link to francois@phoenixed.co.za, and then we'll announce our winner at the following webinar that we'll be hosting in October. Or you can just also send me the link on the WhatsApp group, the WhatsApp service, and I'd be able to have a look at your videos there. But that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing your entries. But what I'd like to do, I'm quickly going to invite Professor De Beer on stage, because he's got our puppets with him. So Professor De Beer, there you go.
Thank you, Francois. This is Karabu. He is visiting, and colleagues, I will discuss with the winners, because we have a range of puppets. This is, as I've said, Karabu. We've also got Sam. Sam is a scientist with his lab coat. So we've got elephants, we've got impalas. I will communicate to the winner, and you can actually select from the range of puppets that we have and choose 2, which we will send to you by courier. So we look forward to receive your puppet scripts. Thank you, Francois.
Thank you for that, Professor. Dr. Beer is signing off. Thank you for sharing those 2 amazing puppets. Dr. Beer actually showed me the elephant and the eland puppet that they made. It's absolutely extraordinary. It is beautiful, beautiful puppets. Now, we have done a lot of introductions so far, but I think it's important for us to get into today's webinar. So aptly titled Using Puppets for Engaging Lessons Even in the High School. And I'll be presenting the most of today's webinar, but I'll be introducing you to some of my other colleagues that's going to assist us with this. But the important thing for me is that it's not about the puppets as such, but that we start thinking about how can we improve engagement in our classes. And it feels a little bit strange to talk about this after 6 months of lockdown, where we went into emergency lockdown remote teaching, where everything felt like we're going towards a more online approach and a digitized approach to teaching, to now suddenly start teaching, I almost want to say in an analog fashion, with actual physical puppets. It feels like this juxtaposition from 6 months ago to now, but the main message is, how can we create better engagement or engaging lessons? Because we want our learners to pay attention, and we want them to learn relevant knowledge, skills, and values. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about values a bit later on with Professor Peterson. So what I thought of doing is just to get those creative juices flowing a little bit. I've got what we call a visible thinking activity. So one way of making your learners, and in this case, everybody that's attending this webinar, making your thoughts visible. Let's look at your creative thinking. So what I have here is a few pictures, and I want you to have a look at them. And we're going to do this one activity. It's called, oh, I'm not going to give it away, otherwise it's not going to be as effective. But what I want you to do, and for those of you that have attended some of my other webinars before, you might be familiar with this technique. But what I want you to do is have a look at these 6 photographs and then complete that sentence. And I want you to literally type it into the chat box. Type in, I see, and then complete the sentence. I'm extremely excited to see what you see. So you type in, I see, and complete the sentence. I'm keeping my one eye on the chat to see what everybody comes up with. And then while I do that, this is maybe a good time to talk about this. When you do online lessons, it's okay to have silence. I know I'm breaking the silence while I'm talking now, but a lot of teachers say that they feel uncomfortable when there's silence on an online teaching, or I see in a modality like this. And this is something we need to get used to. It's okay when there's silence, and it's okay that you're waiting for specific answers to have silence. That being said, I'm still waiting for your responses, colleagues. We've got a few people online. We've got 20 people. I would like to see 20 responses. That would be great. Okay, very interesting what is coming through. Let's see, there we go. Yusuf says, I see fun opportunities that could address the affective domain. And we'll definitely get into that a bit later. Erika, I love your answer. I see fun. Elise, I see things that make me laugh. Now that's very interesting. The effect that these people and their colleagues have on your emotions, and that you say that they make you laugh. Anisha says, I see opportunity. Now that's very meta, that's going very deep. Typically when I do this activity with kids, I want them to write down what they physically see. But working with adults, I know we go a bit deeper into things. Rihanna says, I see happiness. Natasha, I see something for everyone. That's very, very interesting that you mentioned that. And I think we'll touch on that a bit later on. Caitlin says, you see Ahmed and Jeff Dunham. That's like literally what you're seeing. That's awesome. You've identified one of the puppeteers, Jeff Dunham, and Ahmed, the dead terrorist. You might remember him from the catchphrase, I kill you. And then Big Bird, you see Kermit the Frog, Chester, And the girl from AGT, now that's interesting that you could mention the names of some of the other puppeteers, but then that girl, what's that girl's name? And for those of you that don't know, AGT is America's Got Talent. So thanks for that, Caitlin. Then Marie says, I see friends. Temba, I see fun as one of the teaching and learning strategies. And Henny says, I see well-known and interesting characters. Okay, now that's good. Now we've explored what you see. Let's move on to the next part of the activity. And now I want you to complete the sentence. I think. So once again, I think, and then you can complete the sentence. No, Anisha, no need to apologize. That's amazing. But in that case, you see puppets. Good. I'm glad you're seeing puppets. So to complete the sentence now, I think, and then complete the sentence. Let's wait and see what you come up with. There we go. We're seeing a bunch of responses coming in. Just to repeat once again, I think, and complete the sentence. Right, Yusuf says, I think teachers should experiment with puppets. And then Marie-Jean, I think puppets encourage interaction. So there we see a possible response that once you bring a puppet maybe into the classroom, it encourages interaction and maybe the kids would want to interact. Caitlin, I think these people are very talented. And well, it's in that one case, it's America's Got Talent that she appeared on. So I agree with you. All of these people you see on the photos are extremely talented. Natasha, I think we need to laugh more. Especially after the last 6 months and everything that's been happening in 2020, a bit of laughter will go a long way. And I agree with you. The more fun we can have, the more laughs we can have, the better. Henny says, I think these characters are known for grabbing our attention and imagination. That's so powerful that once you see these images and you see these puppets, it goes with, okay, I want to hear what they say next, or I want to know what they say next. I want to see what they do next. So there is this part of grabbing your attention and your imagination. Yerika says, I think puppets provide a voice for learners without having to speak directly. And I see you put in brackets Marty. So I wonder if Marty is sitting with Erika. Are you with or is that something that Marty said? But I agree with you. Nanisha says, I think puppets are fascinating. And I agree with you 100%. They really are fascinating. And Quena says, I think the puppets are scary for kids. Now that's something we need to talk about. The fear element, and it can be, especially when you work with very young children, there might be a fearful element. And I know some people and many adults are actually afraid of clowns. So why not be afraid of these puppets? And there are many Hollywood type of films with puppets, which might not be too great. It's like the horror genre, like The Bride of Chucky and Chucky. Those type of movies can't be great for. So there might be learners that are afraid of puppets. Good. And then Alana says, I think puppets bring in variety and keeps things interesting. Every teacher needs an assistant. Now that is profound. Just think about this thing. Teachers continuously say, oh, we need assistants, and it would be great if I had another assistant in the classroom. Here's a way of cheating in an assistant is by using a puppet. Excellent, that's great. Let's move on to the last part of our activity. And this is where we get into the inquiry-based approach almost, and we complete the sentence, I wonder. So exactly the same that we did with the 2 previous activities. You write, I wonder, and complete the sentence. Okay, we're starting to see some responses coming through in chat. So while you are doing that, let me quickly take you through these photos so that you also know the context where they come from. The first one over here, that's Sesame Street, very famous children's program, more aimed towards your preschool foundation phase type of content that they produce. You've already mentioned Jeff Dunham and Ahmed the Dead Terrorist. He's a ventriloquist, and he also makes his own puppets, which is absolutely amazing. If you can ever watch a documentary on how he makes his puppets, it is mind-blowing. Next to Jeff Dunham, we've got Jim Henson, the creator of Sesame Street and The Muppet Show. So that's Kermit the Frog that's with him. Then on top, we've got Darcy Lynn. Darcy Lynn is her name. And I think she won America's Got Talent, if I'm not mistaken. If you should go and Google her and watch her audition. Absolutely amazing. Next to her, there's a stage production called Warhorse. There was a movie, of course, but also Warhorse, the musical, well, not the musical, the stage production. If you had the opportunity to go and see that, that blew me away, where the horse, the horse is the main character in the play, but it's a puppet, and there's probably 3 or 4 puppeteers that worked with the horse on stage. And after a while, the people just absolutely disappear, and you buy into this premise of the horse being a character, and that was so well done. And then below that, we've got Conrad Koch and Chester Missing, his puppet. I know they're quite active on Twitter as well, taking on many of our politicians, calling them puppets. But those are, so what they all have in common, of course, that they are puppeteers. So let's see what you said. I wonder, we start with Joseph again. I wonder if we shouldn't start a research group on the use of puppetry in the STEM classroom with all of you as co-researchers. That's a typical thing for Prof. De Beer to say, is like, let's get people together. We need to research this because there's a lot of power in using puppets, especially in STEM. Natasha says, I wonder if this would work in an LSEN school. LSEN, for those of us who don't know, learners with special educational needs. And I know Natasha works in an LSEN school, and it would be interesting to see what the effect of puppetry would be in an LSEN school. Marie-Jean, I wonder how the use of a puppet can make a difference in the learning experience. Everything that we're just saying, by the way, I wonder, can become a research question for those of you that want to do some action research or want to go into like further studies. That these I wonder questions would be your research questions. Caitlin, I wonder if young adults will listen better to a puppet than to me. That would be an interesting finding if you realize that maybe we should replace all teachers with puppets, or maybe not. Rihanna says, I wonder about the reaction of the kid, that once you show or you generally introduce the puppet, what would be their reaction? Temba, I wonder, will my learners benefit and understand the content as I'm using the puppet demonstration? So here's a focus on content. Is this a way of improving how kids understand the content or how they comprehend concepts? That's a very good thing to wonder. And then the last one, Erika, I wonder how this can be incorporated more broadly in more subjects or undergraduate teacher training. How can we use this in training our teachers, but also not just to focus on individual subjects, but that we break down those silos between subjects. Maybe that's something that puppets can do. So all of this that we've just done, it situated us in a mindset or in a frame of mind for puppetry. Because that's the whole purpose for today's webinar. So colleagues, thank you very much for participating in that. And to get us started, I want to introduce you to my colleague Louise. Louise is with me. She came all the way, and I'll let her explain where she came from, but she traveled extremely far to be with us today. She's here next to me, and I'm going to have to adjust my screen so that you guys see her. I'm going to invite Louise on stage, and she is then going to take us through the next part of today's webinar. Louise, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Naude. It's an immense pleasure for me to be with you. I might be a little bit shy today because this, you might not believe this, but it is my first webinar. This is the first time that I'm appearing online, and I might be a little bit nervous, but I'm very, very excited to spend time with you and your colleagues today. So I was asked, firstly, thank you so much for introducing my other friends. I know Ahmed personally. He's quite an interesting character, if I can say that. I haven't had the pleasure to work with many of the other puppets that you introduced us to, but it's good to see that you give light to so many of my other peers on your platform. So thank you for that, Dr. Naude. What I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you where I come from. So, Dr. Naude, would you please just put a picture of my, oh yeah, you did it already. There's a picture of my mother. We do resemble each other. People say I look like my father, but I never met him though. So, but I think I look like my mom. So that's Miss Virginia KK. She comes all the way from Jan Kempdorp. Jan Kempdorp, that's where I'm from. And it's a very interesting story how myself and the rest of my brothers and sisters, how we came to life, if you wish. So what happened was that the Northwest University sponsored a few sewing machines to this rural community in Jan Kempdorp. And basically, they started making clothes and a few other apparel. But they were introduced to Professor De Beer, which you saw earlier in today's webinar, and then also Professor Peterson, which you'll meet a little bit later on. Now, what happened was that they asked my mom, Virginia KK, whether they can't make some puppets. And this started an amazing journey towards the creation of myself and all of my other brothers and sisters. So here you'll see a picture of the Volkspan community there from Jan Kempdorp with some of the researchers from the self-directed learning program, and as well as some of the other community members from Volkspan. And they started, without knowing how to make puppets, they started creating myself and my brothers and sisters. So the journey towards creating a beautiful puppet like I am started with them not knowing anything about making puppets. So they started on a self-directed learning journey, and Professor Peterson will speak to us about this a little bit later. But they started on directing themselves on and teaching themselves how to make puppets. So without any patterns or anything, they started making myself and my siblings. And you know what the result is? They started using us to teach teachers how to use puppets when teaching. It is amazing to see the work that my brothers and my sisters are able to do thanks to this community from Jan Kempdorp. So I thought that
would just give a little introduction to what my family tree and where that comes from. So I thought, thank you very much to Dr. Naude for the opportunity to tell my story. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that, Louise. It's good having you here and great to hear your origin story. So thank you for that. Colleagues, can I get some responses in the comments there about Louise? What did you think about Louise and the story that she told us? I would really like to see what you put in the comment section while I vigorously rub my arm because I'm out of practice. But let's hear, what was your thoughts about that story? And while you're thinking about that, the specific modality that I used, or my apologies, that Louise used, what are your thoughts about this? Okay, let's see what we say. Prof. De Beer says the power of SDL, of self-directed learning. Well done to Virginia KK. You are an inspiration. Now, Prof. De Beer and Prof. Peterson has worked with Virginia KK before. I'm looking forward to meeting the community. But such an amazing story of you know, it is a township. It is rural. There's a lot of unemployment, but this whole story empowered people. And if I understand it correctly, and Prof. De Beer can tell us in the chat, they are employing a few other people as well. So it's not only one individual that's benefiting from this, but they're benefiting the entire community. If I understand correctly from what Prof. De Beer told me, is that they actually named one of the streets after Virginia KK, and it's actually KK Street, which is quite cool. Rihanna says, amazing. I'll take that from my mom any day. So if anybody needed to know, my mom is probably my biggest cheerleader and she's here. So thanks for that, mother. We've got Elise Achenbach says, wow, an inspiring story. So it definitely is a great story. Immediately captivating. I listened attentively. My 4-year-old daughter stopped playing and also sat and listened intently. So it doesn't matter what's happening around you. Once that puppet came on screen, it got people's attention. It's also that it's out of the ordinary. And when something is out of the ordinary, it does tend to capture attention. Yusuf says, I think the puppet should have a unique persona. And that's why I went for a different voice there. I promise you, I've been practicing this entire week. And for some reason, it's like I wanted to put an American accent on puppets. It just comes from nowhere. And I'm not fighting it whatsoever. And I think that's one of the things. We need to have the confidence to just let the puppet become alive and get their own persona. And the more you work with your puppet, the more of its own personality it does start to get. Natasha says, can I quote Erika Potgieter and say fun? It is a hell of a lot of fun. I'm in my element. I've been walking around with a smile this entire week in preparation for this, because generally we're so bogged down in academia and teaching and work that we don't get to have fun. And I mean, I didn't think when I started my company a year ago, I thought like I would be sitting and doing a webinar using puppets. So it's invigorating. It's like bringing out the imagination, the creativity, or the creative side of my personality, which I absolutely enjoy. Henny says it's creative. Neil, all people can do self-directed learning. Their environment forced them to be. And when we do the interview a bit later on with Prof. Peterson, we'll elaborate on that. So Joseph said it's a group of unemployed people that make the puppet. So it's one way of giving back to an inspiring story. It just reminded that we can use the little we have to make it more resourceful and beneficial to all. I agree. So I want us to move on to the next part. And what I'll do is I'm going to invite another colleague on stage. I'm going to ask Moses. You have to excuse Moses. He literally just came from work. So he's still dressed in his work apparel. But I'm going to ask Moses to quickly join us on stage. And while we do that, I'm also going to ask Professor Peterson to join us. Let me just toggle everything. I found out that I don't have enough hands. If you want to work with puppets, you probably need to grow some more appendages. There we go, Professor Peterson. Thank you so much for joining us. Who is the puppet? Who do we have there?
Young, after you said look around in the house, I saw my grandchild's Paw Patrol puppet or mask here. So I think I just like to introduce myself as, I don't know what's the name of the person of that. It's Rubble. So it's actually Rubble, but I'm not going to present myself as Rubble here. I'm just showing this to show you that you can actually use anything around you to make something more interesting.
Well, thank you, Rubble. It was good having you here, and Prof. Peterson for grabbing a prop that you could get. That's a lot of fun. Thank you for that. But I'm going to ask my colleague Moses to join us on stage, and he's going to ask a few questions to Professor Peterson. So if I just let's just invite him. Oh, there we go. There we go. Thank you so much, Dr. Naude and Professor Peterson. It is a privilege for me to be able to ask you a few questions. Now, I am a scientist. You see my lab coat and you do see my safety goggles, but it is my apologies that I couldn't dress up appropriately for a prestigious event like this. Professor Peterson, I know from the work that we've been doing, I know science. I am a scientist, but I'm not too familiar with all of the discourse in education. So I've heard everybody talking about this thing of self-directed learning. I was wondering if you can maybe describe to us what is meant with the self-directed learning approach.
Thank you, Moses. I will try to make it easy to understand the concept. As the concept actually indicated, that self-directed learning, it's something that's situated in yourself. And in essence, self-directed learning is actually a process. It's not an event, it's a process where a learner or a person take ownership of his own learning. So that's very important. And if you take ownership, or if you take responsibility of your own learning, you have to do a lot of things for yourselves. And that include, for example, you need to take initiative. You can't wait for your teacher to do everything. You need to take initiative. And if you get a good assignment from your teacher, sometimes, and you have to do, you need to identify your learning needs. So you do have your problem, so what will you do about it? So you need to break it down in smaller individual parts, identify the learning needs, identify your learning goals. So how will you go about in solving this problem? Meaning you are going to choose your own strategies. You're looking for resources. You talk to people to find resources, go to the library, internet, wherever you want to go. Just go and find your resources for yourself. But I think also one of the most interesting or important things of self-directed learning is when you evaluate yourself continuously. It's not as we used to learn rote learning, you just memorize and you don't worry. And in the exam, you just pop down all those answers as you memorize it. Here you have to go back and forth and back and forth. And in the process, you learn. So that is self-directed learning. It's ownership. You take ownership. And Dr. Francois referred to the 5E learning model. So if you really follow SDL process, it's actually the 5 learning model in action, because you can reach all those E's. I hope that will answer your question.
Well, thank you for that, Professor. I mean, if I need to take what you just said and I apply it to what my mom did, you see, my mom, Miss KK, that she didn't know how to make puppets, and she had to go and find out. So she used the internet and other of the other people in our community, and they started experimenting. They started making the first initial puppets, and every time they just when they made a new puppet, they needed to improve. And we are at the moment the latest iteration of their self-directed learning process.
And that's what I meant actually by that all people can be self-directed, especially if your environment also can force you because of your perhaps poor circumstances or whatever. But in the school, that's another thing.
So are we currently teaching the self-directed learning approach in schools? How important is it that we implement self-directed learning in schools?
Moses, I think currently most of us stand in front of the class and we use PowerPoint and we use the blackboard and we just talk and talk and talk and talk, and it's in here and it's out there. And most learners don't understand. And we understand why teachers do that, because they are evaluated based on the exam marks. So they teach to the tests, and therefore we need to change. But I like to ask your question and all the others. Just think, if you have kids or if you want to have kids one day, and I will ask the quick question like this: how do you visualize yourself or visualize the skills and knowledge that your own kid should have at the age when he or she left school? So what skills, knowledge do you see in your kid one day when he leaves school? Any suggestions from the panel? I will give some. I'm also one of those persons who don't like silences, but can you give me reasons, some skills that you want to see in your kids one day?
I'm looking forward to seeing what our audience is going to say in the comments. What skills do you think that your own children will need when they leave school?
Interesting, no answers. So should I help you? I think in terms of that, I have a granddaughter, and I like her to think for herself. Somebody like to be a problem solver, to be creative, to be innovative, to take a stance, and to actually motivate that stance. So we actually refer to 21st century skills. So we need to follow an SDL process in school to develop these. Your mother used all these SDL skills by herself because of her circumstances. But this does not happen automatically in schools. We need to create a good teaching learning environment, an experience where learners can learn these 21st century skills. But they also need other important skills in the 21st century, and that is soft skills such as good communication skills, to work in groups effectively, to listen, to support each other. So that's perhaps one of the reasons why we want self-directed learning, because we want active participants, active citizens in our country to solve all our problems. And there is a curriculum link as well, but I will refer to that later. Thank you, Moses.
Thank you, Professor. How can we implement this SDL approach? Like, how do we actually do it in schools?
We are now busy with self-directed learning for a number of years at the university. And when we do this with our students, they always ask the question, what activities can we do? What methods can we use? We don't have enough time to do that. So please give us some guidance. So what we actually tell the learners is, and I will also first let me come back to myself when I teach. I always ask the question to myself, what can I do during my preparation for the learners to do in class, and what can I do for me to talk less? So in that sense, you will eventually come to an activity where the learners really are active participants, and you as a teacher are also an active participant, but not as somebody that just talk, but somebody as in the form of a facilitator, meaning both of you, both the learners and you, are co-constructors of learners. And in our previous webinar, we referred to cooperative learning. That is one method where learners can work in groups. If it's scaffolded or structured correctly, they can learn. We show you the Bono method. Some other methods can be problem-based learning, like case-based studies. If you link the case during problem-based learning, you link the learning experience to the life world of the learners. Inquiry learning, most of us perhaps are scientists here. We're coming from a science background. So inquiry learning, you can prepare practical work on different difficulty levels. And then today we will also talk about STEAM and puppetry as forms of teaching methodologies to that can enhance self-directed learning skills.
And I think what you're saying is that it's a process. It's not like it's going to happen immediately. It's going to need to be fostered in the school culture and in the classroom culture. So that it's going to develop over a time. It's not going to happen at once.
That's true, but that also says something to the teacher. You need to change your mind shift away from just exam drivenness and just to talk and choke, but it's a trial and error process. From my own experience, some things work, others don't, but in the process, you develop your own skills, your own strategies to use when you create such learning experience. But I think it starts in the head of a teacher to make a paradigm shift.
Exactly. But what does the CAPS document say about self-directed learning?
I don't think the word self-directed learning, you will find the word self-directed learning in the CAPS document, but what you will find, one of the principles state, active and critical learning. And this is just what self-directed learning, the outcomes of self-directed learning are. You create opportunities where learners are active, where they're critical, they're innovative, they solve problems. So that's where that's the link to the CAPS curriculum. The CAPS document gives you lots and lots of skills and especially content, but methodology, no, the CAPS document is silent. That's why we try to use all these different methodologies, a toolbox, as I like to call it, different tools in the toolbox to use for different content and to teach different skills. You know all about the 3 learning specific outcomes, 1, 2, and 3. So you can actually use self-directed learning to teach all 3 of these specific outcomes.
Now, Professor, I know that when I work with kids that just come out of school, they are so focused on the knowledge, the content, and they've got a little bit of skills, but the values, and I know we talk a lot about the affective domain. How does self-directed learning fit into values?
If you look at specific aim 3 that I mentioned in my previous answer, it's all about the understanding of the world, the understanding of science, the place of science in the world, the link to the everyday life, so it actually gives meaning to them. So there's a relationship between what they learn and their real environment. So when we talk about the affective domain, you don't just teach to the head the knowledge that we used to know, memorize facts and all those things. But you also need to speak to the heart, because you need to feel what you learn. And if you feel what you learn, you've talked to your affective side of your body, a very, very important side of your body. And that will assist you in understanding and remembering all these content and skills and everything that you learn. So it's all about feelings, attitudes, emotions, and it's difficult for a teacher to link all the content to these effective domain of teaching. So it's, again, you need to change your mindset to teach for the effective domain. So teach to the heart and the head. Thank you, Moses.
I normally enjoy it when the teachers also teach to my stomach. When they bring in some food in the classroom, so it's not just my head or my heart, it's also my stomach. Professor, there's another word that's going around. It's an acronym. People talk about, I know your project is called STEM, Teachers Without Borders, but there's also a movement called STEAM education. What is the STEAM education?
I think we all know the acronym STEM, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And traditionally, scientists are seen as people, left-brainers, people that are mostly analytical and methodological in their thinking. So that's how we as scientists are trained. That's the way I was trained while I did my first degree. But then as we work with SDL, we also learn about a new approach to teaching, and that is the STEAM approach. And in this sense, we want to bring in the creativity. So creativity is more seen as left-brainers, the artists, those people that scientists don't like because they doesn't make sense to us in most cases. We don't understand the drawings that they make. So how can we combine these left-brain characteristics, right-brain characteristics into a science classroom? That's where the acronym STEAM came from, where the A in STEAM stands for arts. That's where you can bring in your arts. Different people see it as different way. Some people see you can be a creative teacher than you a STEM teacher. Some people see it like that. But you can also use actual art. We went to the Lincoln Institute in New York, and they use all the types of science in the lessons. That was that was a little bit a high grade for me, but in any case, it was very interesting. So follow a STEAM approach, bring in the arts, be creative, use your right brain, use your left brain characteristics, because all your learners in your class will not be only right or left brain learners. So what you can do with the arts is also you can bring in, use it as a contextualization. If you bring in a collage, for example, of a polluted wetland and convert that in a learning experience, let them problematize it. Let them find solutions to it. Let them write puppet scripts. Let them present the script. So in that sense, actually, the whole lesson is built around creativity and the performing arts as such, because you use puppetry. But please read on STEM. It's an interesting field. I recently also read about STEM, where they include environmental education. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Professor. And I agree with that. That we are not two-dimensional people. We are three-dimensional people. We have many interests. Our interests don't always just are just on science or just on math, but we enjoy theater shows and we enjoy watching Netflix series and we enjoy going to the movies. So if our lives include all of these things, our subjects should also include all of this. But thank you very much, Professor, for spending the time with us and explaining self-directed learning
as well as the effective domain and STEAM education to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Francois. It was Moses, it was nice talking to you.
Thank you, Professor. Enjoy your afternoon.
Same to you.
Why, thank you, Professor, and thank you to Moses as well.
Thank you so much. I'll be seeing you a bit later.
Colleagues, that was a lot of fun. My arm is dead. It's absolutely off. I need to be rubbing it now. So just getting the life back into it. Puppeteering takes a lot of practice, but it is a lot of fun. Let's get some comments from you while I'm getting the life back in my arm. Let's get some comments from you in the chat. What did you think about that interview, about that chat that we just had with Professor Peterson? I'm really keen to see what your experience was. I'm still seeing a lot of people are online. I didn't scare you away with one of the puppets. I saw somebody earlier mention that they can be afraid of puppets. Hopefully you didn't run away. And Natasha says it's very interesting. I'm glad that there was value in the discussion. But I'm wondering, put yourself in the puppeteer's feet for a moment, or in their shoes. Don't put them in your feet, put them in your shoes. And just think about what it would take for a teacher to use the puppets like this. What are the reservations that you have? I'd really like to see what you come up with in the chat. But while we do that, while you write down your responses there, I want to quickly refer to this the 5 E's framework. It's initially meant for inquiry-based teaching, but I found it as a great framework to use when you design a lesson or when you design a module or a curriculum. That there are these 5 E's elements that you can use. And if we look at engagement, so the first part, the first E is for engage. Students are engaged with a challenging situation. Prior knowledge is activated. Questions are provoked. If you look back at this webinar, I actually structured the entire presentation today around this. The first activity that we did, the I think I see, or I see, I think I wonder, that's part of engagement. That's asking our learners to analyze a situation and then give their own thoughts. So that's for engagement. Then the next part is exploration. And that's what we did with what Louise told us about her background story, as well as with the interview with Professor Peterson. We had both of these elements, the exploration and explanation that we have. So for explore, your students investigate the phenomenon. Prior knowledge is challenged. You create ideas. And then the explanation, students explain the phenomenon, new knowledge is gained and applied. That's what we did in the first 2 sessions here, is we explored, first of all, we engaged, we explored a specific topic, the self-directed learning, the effective domain, STEAM education, and in general, puppetry as a methodology. And then further explanation. So let's see what we have. Joseph says, I think a teacher can use a puppet as facilitator for those awkward discussions that sometimes need to happen. And I agree, we'll definitely touch on that. Elise says, I'm afraid I won't be funny enough. Don't you have to be a good actor to do this? And I immediately want to say no. Those first elements that I showed you, that's what we associate puppeteering with, is comedy. Ventriloquists, all of these people use puppets for comedy. And of course, humor is important in teaching, but you don't need to be funny. It helps if you're a bit humoristic, but having a puppet doesn't mean that you need to be funny all of the time. It might be an expectation, but that's not the sole purpose. It's one element. So you don't have to feel like I have to be funny all of the time. You also don't need to be a great actor. I think Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and every man an actor. And it's exactly what teachers are. Teaching is acting. It is, if I can remember my first teaching job, I taught all 10 classes of grade 9s. You have got a script by the time. Your lesson plan can be your script. The way in which you enact it is different because you've got different audiences. But teaching and acting is actually pretty much the same thing. So you don't need to be funny all of the time. Elise, that's it. It's not a prerequisite. And you also don't need to be a good actor. It's something you can build into the lesson. Shirley says, I totally agree that teachers need to be innovative or find ways to teach that will motivate learners to learn better. It would take effort from the teacher to use puppets, but it will be beneficial for the learners. And you know what? This is true for majority of the pedagogies. For exciting and engaging pedagogies, you are going to have to put in the effort. I always ask myself, if my learners are not engaging with me, or my students aren't engaging with me, the problem doesn't lie with them. The problem lies with me. I am not creating an environment that's engaging enough. So many great comments. I won't be able to get to everyone. Erika says, although some teachers might feel that they are not actors, I do believe that a lot of investment is needed in the form of workshops or such to support and scaffold teachers to integrate these creative ways of teaching and learning. That's exactly it. The self-directed learning approach is exactly this, that, you know what, we didn't go and study to become actors or puppeteers, but just like Ms. K from Jan Kempthorp, just like how they needed to learn how to make the puppets, so too do teachers need to learn how to use the puppets. It's all part of the self-directed learning approach and being that lifelong learner and upskilling ourselves. We saw in the last 6 months how teachers had to go through workshops and professional development to learn how to do remote teaching. And that's the same for many of the new innovative approaches, and some of them not that new necessarily. So I want us to move on to the next part of the webinar. Otherwise, we're not going to get through everything that I wanted to. But I want you to look into this 5 E's approach to learning. And that brings me to these last 2 parts, the elaboration and evaluation. And the one criticism that we got, and that people in general say, is that puppets can't be used for your high school learners because we're so afraid what's going to happen when our grade 12s, when we walk in there, I've got Moses on my arm and I'm starting to teach to my grade 12 learners. I almost want to say fear or anxiety comes from, will they think I'm lame? Will my grade 12s just walk out of the classroom? I actually asked a few of my friends, what would have happened if a teacher in your grade 12 class came in with a puppet? And some of them said, I'd leave. I'm not here for a puppet show. I want to pass. And I think the way of thinking of using puppets in the high school is to actually not be the puppeteer yourself, but to transfer the puppets onto the learners, where you can make it part of their creation, that they maybe create a puppet script or a play script, and they have to film themselves using their puppets to explain a concept. In that way, you put the onus on them and you have them be creative. So it's not you coming in the classroom with puppets, but you're challenging them. For instance, you can challenge your grade 12s to create a puppet show for your grade 8s. Or let's tell them that for the open day, when the grade 7s come, they have to use puppets to explain a concept. In that way, you're taking away the lameness of the teacher standing there with a puppet, because it can very easily feel lame. Oh, this teacher is trying to be cool, like they're just not that good. Once you put that onus on them and you transfer the puppets into their hands, they, if you look at Bloom's taxonomy, move into the synthesis part, the creativity part, where they need to produce new knowledge. And that's where we can go to the elaboration and the evaluation part. You can even build that as part of your assessments, where you can use puppets for that. So that's typically what I answer when people ask me, how can we use puppets in the high school? And that would be one of the ways. Now, what are the benefits of using puppets? And there's a lot of research being done on this, and I'm sure if you are involved with the self-directed learning research focus of the Northwest University, you'll be able to get access to these articles and research. But I know they're also available. You can just search for it on Google Scholar. You'd be able to get some of the benefits. But from this one article from SWORD 2008, what they say the benefits of puppets are is that it seems less intimidating. And I think Yusuf mentioned it in the comment earlier that it's typically one, you can use your puppets when you are dealing with controversial issues, and we'll get into that a bit later on, or those sensitive issues that where you don't necessarily want to give your opinion as a teacher, but you need to teach the content. You can transfer that responsibility onto the puppet. So it's less intimidating when you do when you use puppets. It also breaks down boundaries because you can, and as one of the other benefits I want to mention quickly, is that it takes up multiple personalities. You as a teacher can play the role. Now, we haven't included it in today's webinar, but if you'd like to learn more about drama in education, you can look at the work of Dorothy Heathcote. One of my master students did work on this as well, but there are different modalities of how you can use drama in education. And in this case, you are taking on the mantle of something else. You are taking on the role of something else. So you remove yourself from the situation and you present maybe two opposing views using two different puppets. That could be one way of doing it. And then it becomes a shield where I'm going to ask you to mention a few controversial subjects or difficult subjects to chat to your learners about the great lessons around. But you create this shield where you don't put yourself personally into the mix, but that you rather mention all of the different aspects. If you remember from our previous webinar where we spoke about De Bono's thinking hats, where we've got these different lenses, these different approaches, and you can use your puppets as the different kind of hats for the specific topic that you are covering. And then it gives confidence. Now, it might not feel that way when you start. It's difficult to put yourself out there, and it's not something that comes naturally or intuitively to many people. But the more you do it, you start gaining confidence in it. You can start having so much fun with your learners. So these are just some of the benefits. There are many, many other benefits, of course. And that's why I mentioned I want us to have a look at the elaboration and the evaluation part of this design framework. And that's where we're going to talk about controversies in the classroom. So in the chat box, let's get some engagement from the audience again. In the subject that you teach, maybe just mention the subject and then what is a controversial issue or what is a sticky issue, if you know what I mean. What is a difficult subject to teach or topic to teach? Let's see what you come up with in the comment section. What are the controversial issues that you need to deal with? Okay, so far we've got a response from Yusuf that says evolution, and this is very, very important. In the life sciences curriculum, especially FET phase in grade 12, it's such a major part of the curriculum. In my master's study, which was supervised by Professor De Beer, I had a look at the lived experiences of Christian teachers and learners when they teach or when they learn about evolution. And that can be very controversial for many people as they feel that it goes against their religion. In this case, when you use puppets, you can actually remove yourself and your own opinion from it, and you can literally focus on the facts, on the specifics of evolution, instead of you trying to teach your specific view of it. So evolution, human cloning, it should be clone humans, and for which reasons? And using puppets, then you can use the different sides of the argument. You can maybe have one group in your class do some research about the reasons for or why we should endorse human cloning, and the other side of the class, the other side of the debate, and they can actually write a puppet script on this and use the puppets in a debate. Are we getting a lot of other ones coming through? I'm liking this. Jocelyn says medical research using animals. So animal testing, cosmetics, the cosmetic industry that uses animal testing, or you look at medication, if pharmaceuticals being tested on animals. Those ethical issues, those sticky ethical issues. If you have, let's say, a puppet of a mouse, and you have a puppet of a chimpanzee on medical research on animals, that might be a way of putting yourself, getting that empathy with the animals, if that's one way that you want to go with it. So thank you for that one, Jocelyn. Shirley, and life orientation, yes, faith and religion, sex education for the grade 9s in natural science when you do reproduction, definitely. Sex education, sexuality education, puppets are definitely one way of doing it. It's more controversial in terms of parents who want their children to learn about this or not. And that's a debate that's going on like forever, is when should we, or should teachers actually teach sexuality, or is that something that needs to be taught at home? But I mean, using the puppets, it's one way of dealing with the controversy. Henny, I like this one. The puppet can be a flat earther as an example. So you bring in the flat earther and the puppet, then the two of you can maybe have more of an argument or a debate, and just mentioning the scientific evidence for and against some of these theories. And then Erika, in mathematics, I would definitely say the different ways in which problems can be solved, which learners tend to fight about. This is probably the most profound comment of the day. Mathematics, I remember mathematics teachers just teaching you a specific method, and that's how you need to get to the answer. But if you can install that confidence in kids using puppets, one puppet finds one way of solving the problem and another puppet finds another way of solving the problem. The fact is that the problem is solved no matter which method you use. So I like that one, Erika. That's very, very good. So that ways in which problems can be solved, which learners tend to fight about. There's no universal approach to solve math problems. It can become very creative in itself. Who would have thought that creativity and mathematics would go together? You could just ask Newton, who had to come up with calculus on his own just to explain the orbits of the planets. But that's typical ways in which you can use puppets. And in history, of course, the same thing. You can have a puppet of Newton explaining the laws of motion. So there's so many ways in which you can use puppetry in the classroom to deal with controversial issues. So great stuff. But we need to move on. We're running out of time. So what are the basics of puppetry? So now we've told you about the benefits, and we've shown you, we've modeled a few ways in which you can use puppetry. But now, if you're a teacher and you want to start off with your own self-directed approach to puppetry, here's a few pointers to start off with. So I've got my friend Carl, who's going to help us out. Now, Carl, there's Carl. I'm going to try and find a nice camera angle to do this on, but there's Carl's face. I'm going to try. This is going to be difficult, but this is Carl. Let me get myself in frame there like this, probably a little bit better. There we go. There we go. This is Carl, my sock puppet. And I just want to, sorry, I didn't mean to do that to you, Carl. Carl is there. The one thing you need to do, you keep eye contact. Now, it's difficult on camera because we need to try and make eye contact with the camera. And it's extremely difficult to do watching a PowerPoint slide and making eye contact. But you want your puppet to have eye contact. Then what you generally do is you point the nose. So the button over there is the nose. It works a bit better with a sock in this case. But you use the nose as the way in which you are pointing. So if you're talking to kids on that side of the class, you point the nose to those kids. So that's one way of doing it. And the other thing is, you don't necessarily need to change your voice. I did that. It comes quite naturally to me to try and do that, but it's not a prerequisite that you need to change your voice. In actual fact, I can use the same voice and have Carl here explain the different things about puppetry, and just use my own voice in the same way. But you don't need to change your voice. You can try the left hand and the right hand. I worked for the majority of today. I worked with my left hand, and I can tell you my arm is shot because I needed to use my right hand for clicking the mouse, having the mic, putting up the professors onto screen and bringing people on stage. So I had to use my left hand. But you can play around which one works better for you, having one in your left hand, one in your right hand. And what you can do is, if you need two puppets, for instance, you can have one of the learners assist you in holding the other puppet. And there's quite a few nice techniques. Now, you would have noticed that my lip syncing is off. I'm a very bad TikToker. I won't be able to, say it. I won't be able to do TikTok well because my lip syncing is extremely difficult, but it's something you get used to the more you do it. But the lip syncing thing comes with practice, but it's fun. It's really a lot of fun to try. And one thing that I didn't put on here, there's a little technique that I want to show you. I'm going to use my other hand quickly. When you speak, when you speak, you can do your hand like this if you want to. But what you can do, they call it the Henson Punch, I think, named after Jim Henson on Sesame Street and the Muppet Show. What you actually do is you flick your finger when you speak. So when you flick your finger when you speak, it actually looks like the puppet is spitting out the words, and it's just a bit more authentic than just going like that. So if you've got your puppet, I'm going to do it like this. Then you flick every single word that you say. You want to flick your finger and open the mouth, because that allows you to look. It looks like the puppet is actually spitting out the words. Okay, good. So those are just some pointers that I wanted to give you. But there's a lot of YouTube videos on this as well if you'd like to get some more information on that. Now, puppets to show emotion is quite interesting. I've purposefully chose to use Carl here as a sock puppet. It's easier to show the emotions using a sock puppet because you've got control of your hands, or your fingers at least. So we're going to try a few emotions with Carl. I just need to get myself in the, let's see if this works a bit better. I can put Carl, no, there we go. Okay, so let's do a few emotions. If we want to do a happy emotion, it's a lot more animated. So if we want to make Carl happy, you can have a lot more animated movements. And then, of course, you get happy. You raise your voice, the intonation of your voice. I am so happy. And then you can do sad, but sad is you're almost mimicking human body language. So when you're sad, you droop your head. You droop your head, and it's a quiet voice and slow movements. I am so sad. It's not lekker. I'm sad. And you can have embarrassed if your character needs to be embarrassed. One way of doing it is there's slow glances and they cover their face. Now, Carl won't be able to cover his face, but there's one way you can just go like, oh, I'm so shy. I'm shy. I'm sorry. I'm so shy. So that's one way of doing that. Confused is a pinched mouth, screwed up face, and scratches the head. Now, Carl's not going to scratch his head, but if he wants to show confusion, Carl can just go like, hmm? So now I know what you're saying. I'm saying something that you don't understand, and Carl can go, hmm? Hmm? It's difficult doing this on a webcam and not in person, by the way, but we'll get through it. Questioning, when you go your head side to side quickly to look at the children. So if you're questioning, you can ask a question like, let's say, for instance, why didn't you go to the bathroom during break? Why didn't you go? So that's, you can have questioning. And then angry, when a puppet is angry, everything is stiff. So it's like quite like rigid movements. So if we look at the camera, like I'm angry, like I'm staring at you, and I'm angry, and I can just like slowly look away, like I despise what you just did. So those are just a few emotions. It's possible to do that with the other puppets as well. But one thing that we can do, and we'll still chat about that, is that you can add little. Let me quickly get Moses again. Sorry, Moses. I'm not going to put my hand up Moses's head, but you can actually attach little Susati sticks or something to their hands, and you can operate it like that. I don't have it on me now, but you can have him scratch his head. And the one thing is, if you're a puppeteer and you are really convincing, the audience starts forgetting about you, because you're creating this lifelike being, and they would excuse your hands or the little stick that's going to scratch its head and stuff like that. So it's definitely possible to improve on your puppets. You don't necessarily need to have the marionette type of Pinocchio puppets. That's quite difficult, but there are general things. Have a look at what Jeff Dunham does with, he does that with Peanut, and he does it with Walter, I think, but some of them have got these sticks that you can use the hands with, and that also makes it a lot more lifelike. So I just thought of sharing with you some of that. Joseph saying that I'm ready for my Oscar. No, let's not go that far, but really do enjoy bringing in the arts into education. Now, when it comes to script writing, and we're just literally going to do a crash course on this, when you plan a specific lesson, it's basically doing a lesson design. When you write your script, it's nice to have a little bit of a narrative. There needs to be the elements of a story in your script. Now, this is where language, creative writing, and science can overlap quite easily and integrate very well. So where you've got the 4 W's when you write the script. So just quickly, who will be the characters in your narrative? So if you think about the competition that we have, this is one way that you can structure your scripts. Start off by asking yourself, who are the characters in your story? And then the what would be the story about? Now, think about stories in the sense that there's always a build-up, and then somewhere there's a climax, something that happened, there's a challenge, there's a problem, then it builds up towards a climax, and then I can't remember the exact terminology for this, but then the Afrikaans, the afloop, is like you moving towards the end of the story, that whole flow. But what is going to be discussed? What would be the topic? Where? So contextually, where is this going to take place? Is it in a lab? Is it on a school field? Is it a story on an airplane? I mean, you can really go wild, but you're setting the context of where this happens. Will this be in a rural area, in the city? You can decide. And then lastly, what is wrong? What is the problem? What needs to be solved? What is the critical thing that's going to happen during this lesson or during this story? So you can use those 4 things as a guideline on thinking about what your lesson, or what your 3 to 4 minute lesson for our competition is going to be about. And then, of course, you write it as a dialogue. Typical dialogue writing, you've got the characters' names on the left of the page, and then what they say and what they do, you put in the other tabs next to that. But it's just a way for you to practice in or get some frame towards your story. You'd notice that today we went totally impromptu. There was some structure to what we have, but the puppets that we used and the script we used for today was very loose. It's not rigid, right? We didn't go word for word because it just makes it feel a bit more authentic. But you need to have a structure to start yourself off with. So, colleagues, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. But I'd really like to get your opinion before I talk about the competition again. In the comments, we started off by asking, do you think that we can use puppetry in the high school? And 13 people said yes, and we had 0 no's, which I'm very excited about. It's good that we've got these innovative teachers that see that we can use puppetry in the high school. But please tell me in the comments, how would you use puppetry. Now that there's a nice thinking routine. Let's use that thinking routine. The thinking routine is called I used to think, now I think. So let's use that one. I want you to write in the comments, I used to think, now I think. So if you can write that, we've got 3 minutes left of this webinar. So if you can write in the comments, I used to think, now I think. Let's see what comes up. And while you do that, I'm going to just repeat our competition. So our competition, the winner will win 2 of our puppets, not these 2 that I have with me. Louise and Moses have got other work to do at other schools, but the 2 puppets that Professor De Beer mentioned at the start, that will be the prize that's going to be given away. I see Prof. De Beer just mentioned that the deadline for the scripts is the 10th of October. So if we can have your scripts by the 10th of October, and then of course your 3 to 4 minute video, if you can send that through to us, and then we'll have announce the winners at our following webinar. Of course, then you can send the link of your video to my email address. That's francois@phoenixed.co.za, and we will then have a look at all of the wonderful videos and scripts that you guys are going to write, and we'll then announce the winner at our next webinar. I'm not seeing anything coming through in our chat, but I'm sure everybody is typing away vigorously. The activity that I gave you is, let's complete the sentences. I used to think, now I think. I used to think, now I think. And while I mentioned that, I'm going to share with you a link. Let me give this link to you. It's the thinking routines developed by the Harvard School of Education. I think, I wonder, as well as the I used to think, now I think activities, and many, many, many others, you'd be able to find on their website. I'm going to give you the link. Let me quickly put it in the call to action. You'll see at the bottom of the screen, there's a button that says Visible Thinking Routines. If you click on that one, it's going to take you to the Harvard School of Education, their Project Zero, and these visible thinking routines. It encourages critical thinking. There's a lot of them there. Go and have a look. I'll also put the URL in our chat for the other colleagues that's going to watch our webinar, watch the recording of it. So to end us off, let's have a look at what you used to think. Natasha says, I used to think LSAN learners struggle to ask questions. Now I think the puppet will show them how to ask questions in lessons. That's so cool. We can actually model behavior or the envisaged behavior by having the puppets. Plus also you can have the puppets ask the questions instead of the learners asking the question, because that takes away the anxiety of I'm asking the question to the teacher, but now no, it's Moses asking the question. So it's that shield that we spoke about. Even for our learners, that's important, that sometimes they feel uncomfortable in asking a question. So thank you, Natasha. That's very good. Elise says, I used to think why students would think it is silly to use a puppet. Now I think they might actually like it. Elise, please try it out and let us know how it turned out. You'll always have that element in your class. Some of the kids are going to think it's lame and it's not going to be. That's fine. You're not doing this for all of your learners. Remember, this is what I think Professor Peterson mentioned this. You're using it as a part of your toolbox. Your puppets are one of the tools in your toolbox. Caitlin, I used to think that there wasn't space for such creativity of puppets in a very logical subject like accounting. But now I think there's space, especially with the grade 8s during the foundation principles of accounting. Excellent. If that's one thing that this webinar assisted with, is like breaking down that preconceived notion that puppets are for the arts. It's only supposed to be in the drama class or the arts and culture class, but we can bring it into the accounting classroom. That integrated approach is really, really powerful. Joseph, I would actually ask my students in small groups to write their own scripts and stage a puppetry show. One way of them showing their content, showing their content knowledge, their skills, of course, and their values. So having the kids actually creating their own scripts. Natasha, don't worry about it. Everybody struggles with spelling. It's we just keep on typing. It's fine. And he says, I used to think that puppets aren't ideal for high school students, but now I think there might be some potential in using them for high school students. And even just start gradually. You don't have to teach your entire lesson with puppets. You'd see that this webinar, we had puppets as part of some of the episodes. We didn't have them throughout. It wasn't presented by puppets from the start to the finish. So start gradually introducing the use of puppets, or if you want to dive into the deep end and do a full-on show. But thanks for that, Henny. And then lastly, Tandeka, I used to think puppets are only useful in kindergarten and primary school. Now I think it's actually useful in any other grade, as long as you have good pedagogical knowledge and you can master it. If I can add to that, Tandeka, if you've got a pedagogical framework, like the 5 E's framework, it's not the only framework, but it's one way of designing your lessons. There's pedagogical reasoning behind using the puppet. It's not just using a puppet for puppet's sake, but that we actually include from a pedagogical, sound, academic point of view. It can really be powerful. Well, colleagues, I'm going to ask you one last time to send me photos with you and your puppet. If you feel like going to grab a puppet now somewhere, that's great. But please take a pic with yourself and a sock puppet or any other toy, and just send us a photo through to the WhatsApp service. It would be great to see how our community gets involved. It's difficult not doing this in person. We want to create an online community, so it would be great if you can send us some of your pictures and we'll share it. I see Joseph says that it's for our Northwest University newspaper. It would be great if you can send some photos. And how cool would it be to show all of our other colleagues that, you know what, we are going to start using puppets in our teaching. From my side, that is the last thing from me. Joseph and Neil, Professor De Beer and Professor Peterson, thank you very much for the opportunity to spend some time with our STEM Teachers Without Borders this afternoon. Colleagues, you should have a great afternoon and enjoy the weekend that's almost upon us. Thank you very much.